I'm an international representative for the United Association of Plumbers, Pipe Fitters, and Sprinkler Fitters, and also lead the Clean Energy Jobs Coalition of New York.
Okay, so talk to me a little bit about like what you actually do on the daily. Like, what's your mission?
Well, again, I represent more than 24,000 UA members in the state of New York, everything from jurisdiction to arbitration. But what has taken so much of our time over the last 3 years is the transition of my workforce, in addition to tens of thousands of building trades members that are being eliminated from the energy transition in New York State.
So as I'm looking at the press release here, I'm seeing that the Clean Energy Jobs Coalition, comprised of labor and management leaders representing more than 270,000 skilled energy workers. So like you said, foster green energy economy and creating jobs. So it looks like right now, working on grid reliability in central New York for the projected manufacturing needs of Micron. Can you talk about that, what that means?
Well, and as we spoke about earlier, any questions we can't answer, Greg Lancette, who's the business manager of UA Local 81, will be able to send it to you sometime today if you need it.
Sure.
So we think about the push to bring manufacturing back to New York State, all while some of the loudest voices in the environmental community are looking to electrify, shut all power supply and electrify New York State. And it contradicts itself. You can't do that. In order to bring manufacturing back, you need reliable, dispatchable energy. But at the same time, we want to have clean, dispatchable energy, and that's possible. But it's not possible at this stage of the transition to have all renewable, because there's no storage available. You need reliable, dispatchable, clean energy, alternative clean sources, or all of the above, as we always say.
What's the difference between clean energy and alternative energy and other kinds of energy?
Alternative clean sources would mean hydrogen, would mean nuclear, would mean biofuels, things that are low to no carbon emissions, but not necessarily renewable. When they talk about renewable, typically it's sun, wind, and water.
Gotcha.
Alone. And that's good. And we say, build all you can, but it's still not enough. You need to have other forms of reliable energy. And while you do it, you want to make sure it's clean.
Okay. And so I do have a couple of little questions that they sent to me, which is very, very handy. Because I'm no expert on the topic, but I think you are. Can energy upgrades at existing power plants reduce emissions as replacement renewable energy sources are being built?
Correct. That is the logical way to proceed. There are some of the loudest voices that are looking to shut down every power generating facility, and they say, well, we'll figure it out. You can't do that. What we need to do is shore up the reliable energy, the existing plants today. There's two that come to mind immediately in the Hudson Valley. You have Danskammer Energy and you have NRG, which is in Queens. Those plants are peaker plants. They're fossil fuel plants. Peaker plants only run when the grid, there's not enough power to supply the grid, almost like a generator in your home. If you have no power, you turn on the generator. That's what a peaker plant does. Oh. Those two projects were ready to start. They were shovel ready, and they would retrofit those plants to run on 30% hydrogen from day one. So they'd be much more efficient, much cleaner, and would only run if we needed the energy on the grid. They were stopped because of the CLCPA. It put 1,200 building trades members out of work for 3 years and still jeopardizes the reliability of the grid.
So talk to me a little bit about why clean energy is, I mean, it seems like such an obvious answer, but why is clean energy and, an attempt to keep one's carbon footprint to a minimum, why is that important?
Well, I think it is important, and it's great. It's a great question. So we've tried very hard to change the narrative from renewable energy to clean energy, because in our minds, it's one and the same. In fact, clean is even better because it includes, and again, when I say reliable, dispatchable, that means you turn on the switch and you have power. If the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing, you still have power. And that's the difference. So we believe climate change is real. There's no doubting climate change is real. It's how we get to the goals is where we differ sometimes with some of the environmental groups.
And what kind of things do you differ on?
Well,
you disagree about?
we support retrofitting existing plants. Right now, the plan is through the Climate Action Council to start to close down power generating facilities. And we say clean them first. And especially the fact that New York State is taking the lead in trying to create a Northeast hydrogen hub. There's trillions of dollars a year being spent on hydrogen infrastructure. We'd be right in the center of that. We'd be able to retrofit fossil fuel plants to hydrogen plants. Zero emissions, zero carbon emissions, great high-skilled union jobs, reliable forms of power. But again, anytime we try to even talk about that, some groups try to shut it down. All they want is solar, offshore wind, and hydroelectric from Canada.
And you don't think that that's reasonable?
It should be a part of the puzzle. It's only one piece of the
Gotcha.
energy grid, not all. That's why we, again, talk about all of the above, but even more importantly, the facilities that I spoke about are the largest job creators. Probably the best job creator and most efficient form of zero emissions energy is nuclear energy. It's got zero carbon footprint in multi-generational, high quality union jobs.
So, okay, I have to admit some of this, I feel like I'm slowly starting to like grasp an understanding about what you're saying. I think I got kind of
Sure.
caught up on the difference between clean and renewable. And now I feel like now that I understand that, I can ask you better questions. So in terms of like, we talked about what your mission was, what you were doing. I think the next thing that we were going to discuss was the Utility Thermal and Networks and Jobs Act.
Yes.
How labor, business, environmental groups came together to advance that policy into law. What is it and when did that happen and what does it mean?
So if we take a step back, we look at where the carbon emissions come from. You have power generation. We talked about power plants. When it comes to thermal energy networks, we talk about buildings. So buildings emit tremendous amount of carbon into the atmosphere. So the push has been to go to air source heat pumps or electric heat. If you've spent any time in Western New York, you know that if you just have electric baseboard, it is not efficient. It's very expensive and it doesn't really heat your home. Air source heat pumps or mini split systems have helped. Technology's not there yet, but what happens in the winter? They work that much harder on the electric grid. What happens in the summer? They have to work that much harder on the electric grid. The thermal energy network, what that does, it supplies water to ground source heat pumps. Very simple. You've heard of geothermal before.
I've heard of it.
Energy,
I can't tell you what it is. But
sure. Geothermal energy consists of wells that go into the ground and bring tempered water because the earth has a consistent temperature. You feed the ground source heat pumps with 55-degree water and they're super high efficiency. So a furnace in your home, if you have an oil furnace or a gas-fired boiler and you have 90% efficiency, you feel pretty good. A ground source heat pump can be between 300 and 500% efficient. That's what's so great about it. And it doesn't add to the power grid. Summertime, wintertime, the electric demand remains the same. The difference is instead of wiring infrastructure, electric infrastructure, you have piping in the ground. So you'd have piping in the ground that return hot water down, brings tempered water back up, cold water down, tempered water back up. And in return, it creates a transition for utility workers, for plumbers and pipe fitters, for sheet metal workers. It's a tremendous amount of jobs involved. So to get to your initial question, you said, how did this come about? I sat with a few environmental groups and the Building Decarbonization Coalition, along with some designers of geothermal and thermal energy networks. Together, we collaborated and found there was a lot we could agree on. And some even asked me, well, did you talk about nuclear or did you talk about hydrogen? We said, no, we focused on this. We didn't want to let perfect be the enemy of the good. Let's focus on that. We saw the potential. We've spoken to the legislature. It went unanimously through the Senate, almost unanimously through the Assembly, and was signed into law on July 5th by the governor. And what this does, it allows utilities, the 7 utilities in New York State, think about instead of running a gas grid or a power grid, now a thermal energy network, which are water lines underground that would feed communities, would feed institutions, brings them into the building, you tie them into ground source heat pumps, you decarbonize, you put in high efficiency heat pumps, and it's a win all the way around. It's good for the workers, it's good for the environment, it's good for the ratepayer.
You're clearly very passionate about this, which is great. I mean, I can just feel it. You really, that was probably a big moment for you, right?
It was. And
Yeah.
it was a start because most didn't really fully understand, even within my industry, some of my members didn't understand. They said, why are they looking to rip out boilers? And our position is you could rip out boilers if you're putting in ground source heat pumps. It's the same for
Right.
us. Work is
Right.
work. We're not partial to what runs through the pipe. We just want pipe.
Right, fair enough. So moving right along, another question that was listed is, can New York install thermal heating and cooling systems at state offices and schools to reduce emissions
Great
and lower
questions.
energy bills?
So what we did is we continued the collaboration with the group that passed this first utility thermal bill. And now we are petitioning the governor to focus on 15 state facilities that are the highest carbon emission campuses and facilities to start to run thermal energy networks on those, focus on those.
And
so it can be done and it will be done. And the New York State Energy Research Development Authority, NYSERDA, is actually funding several thermal projects in addition to the utility bill.
cool. So moving right along, as New York moves to transition away from fossil fuels, do we need other types of energy than just renewable? And I think we talked about, I've got it, the difference. Is there a role for hydrogen and new nuclear technology to play in New York's clean energy future? First of all,
Yes.
what is new nuclear
They
technology?
have, instead of a very large nuclear plant that you might see with plumes of steam on a riverfront, they have small modular reactors that they can actually assemble in place. So they don't have to be massive 1,000-megawatt facilities. They can be much smaller to serve the purpose. And I believe NYSERDA is going to be focusing on also employing some of these small modular reactors. Sometimes they're called advanced nuclear reactors. They're smaller, they're extremely safe, and zero carbon emissions. If we're going to achieve our climate goals, we have to rely on nuclear and hydrogen as well.
And Buffalo, right, our neighbor, which is crazy. Buffalo has been having so much snow and we've gotten none. It's outrageous. Like
right.
I've been in Rochester for several years and I've never lived a winter where, it was like no snow and the temperatures are so mild. But so our good neighbors, Buffalo, they had a really serious weather event, big blizzard, extreme weather events happen all the time.
Yes.
What does that tell you about the need for energy reliability and resiliency? These are good questions. By the way, I didn't come up with these. I'm going on a script right now, so I can't take credit for them, but they are very good questions.
It's perfect. It illustrates really to all of New York why it's necessary to have reliable, dependable. It's not philosophical. It's not people feel, no, we need to reduce carbon emissions. We get that, but the reliability of the grid is first and foremost. The safety of the residents of New York is first and foremost. And that's perfect example of what could take place. One tragedy, we saw what took place in Texas, right? In Texas, where more than 200 people died. And they had mostly air source, there was a lot of reasons, but air source heat pumps that fried the grid and there was no power.
Right. Electric buses and cars, I don't know where this is coming from, but are projected to replace gas and vehicles in the next 15 years. First of all, is that true? And who's saying that? Number two, does this mean New York will need more power, not less?
Yes, it will. That's exactly the point. If the plan is to electrify further and go with electric vehicles, you need to make sure you have an adequate supply. Solar is not enough. Hydroelectric is not enough. It supplements what needs to be part of the reliable grid. And again, when I say reliable, dispatchable, that means turn on a switch and you have power. You know that the lights will go on.
One thing I kind of wanted to circle back around to was when you said the bit about cleaning existing power plants. Is that what okay. What all goes into that? Because that does not sound like something that would be like cheap nor easy to do though, right? Or no?
First of all, most of it is privately funded by those power companies themselves.
Oh,
and these are high skilled jobs. And what they do is they retrofit them to make them more efficient And with the emergence of hydrogen, that's exactly what they're trying to do. They want to start to infuse hydrogen into the gas lines, where, again, today, these turbines, which actually generate the power, can run on 30% hydrogen and 100% hydrogen by 2040, 100%. So why not retrofit those, employ New Yorkers that raise their families in New York, rather than taking hydroelectric power from Canada?
I mean, yeah, I didn't even think about that. Just the act of changing a plan creates jobs.
Right.
You know,
Local jobs. These are
right.
all local jobs.
Yeah. So one thing, it's just a personal question, switching
Sure.
gears a little bit now that those are out of the way. Are you one of those people who has like solar panels on your roof?
Believe it or not, I'm actually looking to get pricing on geothermal because, of course, where I live, they don't have thermal energy lines as of yet. But I'd like to convert my boiler to a geothermal ground source heat pump, and it would be great to supplement that with some solar. So today I don't, but I think I will. If we talk again in another year or two, I think I will.
Are you in the like research phases of what
Exactly
goes into that?
And there's so much available in the form of tax credits and incentives. Yeah. It makes sense. If you're going to do it, it makes sense, especially if your furnace is at the end of its useful life. It would make sense to go to something that's highly efficient.
I don't know. I mean, it makes sense to me, but I never even thought about that there would be tax incentives.
30% tax credit right now.
There you go.
30% on the cost.
All right. So I guess if there's one thing that you hope people will take away from this interview in its simplest form, what would it be? Is
to try to take the emotion and hysteria out of this process, and let's look at it logically, let's look at it strategically, and make sure that we're protecting the ratepayers and the citizens of New York State while we deliver cleaner energy. But the decisions have to be made on logic and information, not on emotion.